May 28, 1940. In the Reich Air Ministry in Berlin, Reich Marshal Hermann Göring tossed aside an intelligence report with open scorn. It described President Roosevelt asking Congress to boost American aircraft production to 50,000 planes a year. The Americans are desperate if they think such boasts will scare us, Göring told his staff. They know nothing about war production. Let them try to switch their car factories. They will learn that building warplanes takes more than assembly lines. What Göring missed was that in Detroit, a Danish-born American named William Knudsen was already proving him wrong. The former General Motors president, now working for $1 a year as Roosevelt's production chief, was coordinating the boldest industrial shift in human history. Within 4 years, American factories would not just reach the impossible 50,000 planes, but would approach 100,000 a year, while also supplying 2 distant wars across the Atlantic and Pacific. The speech that sparked German contempt came on May 16, 1940, as German panzer divisions raced through France. Facing Congress, Roosevelt said, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." Many scoffed, including allies. In 1939, the United States had built only 3,611 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps had 1,700 combat planes, many outdated, yet Roosevelt demanded a 14-fold increase. William Knudsen soon became the architect of this surge. Asked who could deliver the impossible, advisor Bernard Baruch replied, "First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen gave up a $300,000 salary to serve his adopted country, bringing car-making methods like mass production and parts standardization into aircraft plants." The change began at once. By December 1941, American factories were turning out 2,000 military aircraft each month, a 20-fold jump in 2 years. Ford announced a huge bomber factory at Willow Run, Michigan. Boeing grew its Seattle complex. Douglas hired thousands. The arsenal of democracy was waking up. Nazi leaders dismissed U.S. strength out of prejudice and wishful thinking. General Friedrich von Boedeker, Germany's military attaché in Washington from 1933 to 1941, sent accurate reports about America's rising war industry. In December 1940, he warned, "American war production will reach unimaginable heights." Berlin brushed this off as defeatist. When Boedeker met Hitler in February 1939 to discuss U.S. potential, the Fuhrer ranted about racial degeneracy instead of hearing the facts. He said Americans were half Judaized, half Negrified, and unable to fight a long war. This blindness proved fatal. Bias ran throughout the system. Luftwaffe intelligence dismissed reports of women working in airplane factories as signs of U.S. weakness. They could not imagine a democracy mobilizing more effectively than a dictatorship. When reports claimed factories ran 3 shifts, German analysts assumed exaggeration. Their ideology simply could not grasp U.S. reality. Ford's Willow Run plant symbolized American ambition. Built on farmland starting April 18, 1941, it became the world's largest building under one roof, 3.5 million square feet, with a mile-long line. Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief, promised 1 B-24 bomber per hour when others made one a day. Early results were poor. The first bomber finished in September. 1942 needed a complete rebuild. Quality failures hit 50%. By February 1943, Willow Run made only 56 bombers a month, far below promises, and critics mocked it as, "Will it run?" But Ford engineers kept going, breaking the B-24's 488,193 parts into subassemblies, inventing hydraulic riveting tools, pre-made wiring harnesses, and moving lines. They absorbed 578 design changes in 1943 while increasing output. By September 1943, monthly production reached 148 bombers. By December, 365. The breakthrough came in April 1944. Willow Run produced 428 B-24s, one every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day. This single factory outproduced Germany's entire aviation industry. German pilots first felt the tide in North Africa. In December 1942, Major Johannes Steinhoff of JG-77 noted, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. Most disturbing, there are more of them every day." The truth became undeniable through 1943. On January 27, 1943, the U.S. bombed Germany itself for the first time, with 64 bombers hitting Wilhelmshaven. By October's Black Thursday at Schweinfurt, the Americans could lose 60 B-17 and replace them in 2 weeks. The math was merciless. During Big Week, February 20th to 25th, 1944, the U.S. 8th and 15th Air Forces launched 3,500 bomber sorties against German aircraft plants. The Luftwaffe lost between 262 and 355 fighters, and, more damaging, around 100 irreplaceable veteran pilots. General Adolf Galland told Göring that Germany was losing 1,200 fighters per month while making 1,000. The U.S. was producing 2,500 fighters per month while losing 400. Ace Heinz Baer recalled a January 1944 mission over Brunswick. The bomber stream stretched from horizon to horizon, at least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. We were 8 fighters against hundreds. It was hopeless. By 1944, U.S. aircraft production reached jaw-dropping levels. That year alone, factories produced 96,270 aircraft, including 16,048 four-engine bombers, 35,743 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine planes. That single year exceeded Germany's entire wartime output of roughly 94,677 aircraft. The gap was not only in quantity. American bombers bristled with 13.5 zero-caliber machine guns and carried thousands of rounds. German fighters increasingly launched with partial ammunition. U.S. bombers had powered turrets, advanced bomb sights, and strong navigation gear. German fighters often lacked working radios. By May 1944, Boeing's Plant 2 was building 16 B-17s a day. Douglas, which had 68 employees in 1936, grew to 167,000 across 9 sites. North American turned out 500 P-51 Mustangs per month. Lockheed built a P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes while making 2,127 combat-driven improvements. Suppliers kept pace. General Motors built 57,658 aircraft engines under license. Packard produced 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlins. Alcoa boosted aluminum output 600%. Dow's magnesium soared from 6 million pounds a year to 333 million. The reshaping of the workforce shattered Nazi myths. Women, less than 1% of aircraft workers in 1941, made up 65% by 1943. About 310,000 women in the industry. At Douglas Long Beach, more than half the workforce were women. Roswell Monroe, a real-life Rosie the Riveter, drove 3,000 rivets per shift at Willow Run with 99.5% accuracy. Women inspectors at Douglas cut defects from 3.2% to 0.3%. Ford redesigned tools for smaller hands and unintentionally improved overall efficiency. Lighter pneumatic tools reduced fatigue, and better workstations cut injuries. German intelligence called female employment a sign of collapse. In fact, precision went up. Women excelled at wiring, instruments, and inspection. Their success reflected democratic strength, not weakness. As American output soared, Germany turned to fantasy. Göring launched the Jaeger program in February 1944, scattering production into 729 underground sites using slave labor. The Mittelwerk complex used 60,000 prisoners in horrific conditions, killing 20,000. These factories made more defects than aircraft. Prisoners sabotaged parts. Shipping components between dispersed sites caused delays. Quality collapsed. The entire Mittelwerk complex produced fewer engines per month than Ford's single Chicago plant. Meanwhile, U.S. innovation accelerated. Boeing developed modular B-29 construction across 4 plants with fully interchangeable parts. The pressurized B-29, at about $650,000 each, used technology Germany could not match beyond prototypes. By early 1945, the U.S. was producing 100 B-29s a month. June 6, 1944, revealed the result. The D-Day invasion used 11,590 Allied aircraft against 319 German sorties, a 36-to-1 advantage. This was not just tactical strength, it was industrial domination. From January to May 1944, Allied bombers dropped 145,000 tons on German targets, more than all German bombing of Britain during the war. Transport planes delivered 3 airborne divisions in one day, with more aircraft than Germany's transport fleet ever had. By December 1944, single raids used 1,200 bombers with 900 fighter escorts. The P-51 Mustang had the range to reach Poland and the performance to match any foe, and existed in numbers that made losses bearable. German pilots called them Indians, swarming everywhere at once. As defeat loomed, even Nazi leaders admitted the production disaster. In December 1944, Joseph Goebbels wrote, "Göring's promises about Luftwaffe superiority now seem criminal delusions. We fight the world's greatest industrial power with rhetoric," Field Marshal Rommel told his staff before D-Day. "The Americans can lose 10 tanks for everyone we destroy and still overwhelm us. When they land, they will come with such material superiority that no position can hold." Even Hitler told Speer in January 1945, "We should have listened to Bodecher's reports. Their industrial potential was decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands." Albert Speer later testified that American bombing cut German output by 35% for tanks, 31% for aircraft, and 42% for trucks, saying the targeted attacks broke German armaments. Germany's Me-262 jet, operational in mid-1944, was a true advance, about 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Hitler and Göring hoped this wonder weapon could restore control despite being outnumbered. But Germany built only about 1,430 Me-262s, with never more than 200 in service at once. Engines needed overhauls every 10 hours. Shortages forced inferior materials. The United States had started jet work in 1942. The Bell P-59 fell short, but Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, better than any German jet, entered production before war's end. American industrial depth allowed work on multiple technologies at the same time, a luxury Germany lacked. In a total war, high quality without high quantity was useless. Göring's arrest on May 8, 1945, by the U.S. 36th Infantry Division began his final reckoning. At first defiant during questioning at Augsburg, he insisted German technology was superior and defeated only by numbers. After transfer to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg for intensive interrogation, his view shifted. In July 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler recorded Göring's growing recognition of American industrial dominance. "I knew American industrial potential was great," he admitted, "but the execution exceeded my worst fears. That single factory at Willow Run produced more aircraft than our entire bomber force at peak. It was incomprehensible." He was shocked by U.S. logistics. "Your ability to supply forces across 2 oceans while keeping domestic production was beyond our conception. We couldn't supply forces 500 miles from Germany. You supplied armies 5,000 miles from America." At Nuremberg, prosecutors buried him in evidence. Charts showed the U.S. producing more aircraft monthly by 1944 than Germany did yearly. Films of Willow Run's lines played while prosecutors listed German cities destroyed by bombers from that single plant. In testimony on March 14, 1946, Göring struggled with the scale. He had believed U.S. economic and technical potential was large, especially in air power, but could not imagine a 100-fold production jump in 4 years. Prison psychologist Gustav Gilbert noted Göring's fixation on production ratios, comparing single American factories to all of Germany, especially Willow Run, that damned factory that broke our backs. When shown that America had produced 812,615 aircraft engines versus Germany's 241,675, he fell silent. The math of defeat could not be denied. The scale still astonishes. From 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, the U.S. produced 295,959 by war's end, 97,810 bombers, 99,465 fighters, and 98,684 other aircraft. This was not just volume, but superiority in the whole system. At peak, 2 million Americans worked in aircraft production. The workforce was broad and diverse: women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and elders. A free society did what forced labor could not. Workers who knew nothing about planes in 1941 became the world's most skilled aviation workforce by 1945. They did more than build aircraft. They reshaped manufacturing. Statistical quality control developed for bombers spread to global industry. Automation ideas pioneered at Willow Run transformed factories worldwide. The engineers who built bomber lines later designed the Saturn V. The women who riveted B-24s raised children who walked on the moon. The money involved defied old economic ideas. Aircraft production cost about $45 billion in 1940s dollars, around $800 billion today. The B-29 program alone cost more than the Manhattan Project. Yet instead of crippling the U.S., this spending created lasting prosperity. Unemployment from the Depression vanished. Personal incomes doubled between 1940 and 1945. Workers themselves helped finance expansion by buying war bonds. Willow Run workers alone purchased $45 million in bonds, funding their own factories' work. Germany, by contrast, devoted 40% of its industry to aircraft by 1944 and still made less than half of U.S. output. Slave labor backfired. Sabotage was widespread. Quality collapsed. After 1943, productivity per German worker fell, while American productivity rose 300%. The wartime build-out became the base of post-war growth. Aluminum smelters that fed bombers supplied metal for housing. Chemical plants that made aviation fuel led to plastics for consumers. Machine tool factories that equipped aircraft plants retooled American industry for global leadership. Beyond raw numbers, the U.S. excelled in organization. The War Production Board coordinated 184,000 companies smoothly. IBM punch cards tracked millions of parts across thousands of suppliers. MIT's Radiation Laboratory, with 4,000 scientists, built navigation systems that gave American bombers all-weather capability. When combat showed B-17s were vulnerable to frontal attack, Boeing added chin turrets in 60 days. When the Pacific required longer range, Consolidated modified B-24s without stopping the lines. Where Germany took months or years to implement changes, America did it in weeks. Adaptability mattered as much as quantity. U.S. aircraft evolved continuously based on global combat feedback. Information flowed from the field to engineers and then to production lines in days. Line workers' suggestions reached designers directly. This open, rapid loop in a democracy beat rigid, top-down control in a dictatorship. On October 15, 1946, hours before his scheduled execution, Göring wrote his final letter. He made his clearest admission. The Americans won by industrial power, not by better soldiers. Germany was buried under aluminum and steel by a nation it had mocked as only able to make consumer goods. His last words to Gilbert echoed the same truth. Germany had declared war on a sleeping industrial giant. Once awake, it was unstoppable. The U.S. did not just outproduce Germany. It reinvented production itself. Göring killed himself that night, but his final recognition stands as history's verdict. The Reichsmarshal, who had sneered at American capacity, died knowing that one U.S. factory outran his entire bomber force at its peak. Military historians view American production as the decisive factor in Allied victory. Without overwhelming material superiority, D-Day would not have happened. The strategic bombing campaign would have faltered, and the Pacific War would likely have been lost. Historian Richard Overy concluded, the outcome was determined not by fighting spirit or tactical brilliance, but by the weight of material. By 1944, the United States alone made more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined, Allies and Axis. This was not a small edge. It was dominance by orders of magnitude. Yet the meaning goes beyond victory. It proved the edge of democracy over dictatorship, freedom over tyranny, and voluntary cooperation over forced labor. The workers who achieved this were not slaves or conscripts, but free citizens with a shared purpose. Göring's scorn for American production may be history's costliest mistake. His contempt for democratic industry cost Germany the war and millions of lives. His failure to see U.S. capability doomed the Reich before the first bomber crossed German skies. The rise from 3,000 to 100,000 aircraft annually showed that free societies, when threatened, can do the impossible. American workers did not just meet Roosevelt's goal, they doubled it. They did not just match German output, they surpassed it fivefold while fighting in two theaters. Leaders today should remember Göring's error, dismissing democracies as weak because they are peaceful, or underestimating free people because they prize prosperity over conquest, invites disaster. In 1940, America looked unready. By 1944, it was an industrial colossus. The arsenal of democracy proved that production lines can be as decisive as front lines, that assembly workers can be as crucial as soldiers, and that mobilizing industry can decide a war as surely as battlefield tactics. Göring learned too late at the price of his nation's ruin. From mocking Roosevelt's 1940 call to his 1946 end, his path traces Nazi Germany's fall. His contempt became the epitaph of the Third Reich, a regime that confused ideology with ability, mistook tyranny for strength, and believed racist myths could beat industrial math. The Reich's marshal, who jeered at U.S. aircraft production, died knowing that American factories built more planes in 1944 alone than Germany made in the entire war. His mockery became history's most expensive joke, paid for in total defeat. America built 295,959 military aircraft. Germany built 94,677. The deeper victory, though, was in method. Free workers outproduced slaves. Democratic cooperation beat totalitarian command. A nation of immigrants and diverse citizens united to achieve the impossible. The B-24s rolling off Willow Run every 63 minutes were more than machines. They were democracy's answer to tyranny. Each rivet by a woman who had been a housewife, each engine by a teenager who left school to serve, each wing by workers who had known hardship and prejudice. Together, they proved that free people, united in a just cause, can bury tyranny under an avalanche of production. Göring laughed at 50,000 planes. America built twice that and changed the course of history. His laughter became the sound of catastrophic miscalculation as 300,000 American aircraft transformed his contempt into complete defeat.